Yaakov, I'd like to go back to this plan then that Israel has come up with of potentially getting Gazans out of the hospitals and putting them on boats or elsewhere so that the bombing campaign and the war on Hamas can continue. What are your thoughts on that?
It's an extension of Israel's overall attempt to move civilians out of Gaza City, out of North Gaza, and stop them being used as mass human shields by Hamas. And whether that happens through the transfer of the civilians down the land corridors that head from north to south, or some via ship, I don't think Israel's very fussy about how it happens. It just wants to get as many civilians out of those combat zones as possible, because as we see, the ground forces are in a phased manner, but in a very clear manner, closing in on Gaza City. So the less civilians there, the better. That's Israel's interest, and Hamas is in exactly the opposite interest.
There are clearly still civilians in the conflict zone, though.
Of course.
And we don't know whether they're being forced to stay by Hamas or if they simply can't move. But some of the aid groups are saying it's not physically possible to empty out a hospital of sick people. Do you see any complications there?
Well, I think that, the aid organizations, if, where there's a will, there's a way, because if underneath this hospital there is a central Hamas, a military terrorist command center, there's no way that Israel is going to eventually leave that standing. This is a war. And the whole point of using human shields is to hamstring Israel's offensive capabilities. So Israel is not going to allow that to happen, but it is providing a long-term early warning, saying this hospital is not really just a hospital. It's put a red flag on it. It's notified everybody. It's building legitimacy. I think, we can see where this is all going.
Avi, Egypt is key to all of this. Egypt and Israel's relationship, which has, predictably become under strain following the war. But Egypt will be key in terms of any kind of aids to Gazan civilians.
I'm quite confident in the relationship between Egypt and Israel. We have now signed a peace treaty 44 years ago, and it's holding not because the Egyptians like the situation, but because it is their interest. And we went up already through a roller coaster with those relations with Egypt. I remember well in 1982, during the first Lebanese war, when Egypt withdrew its ambassador from Israel, and we were without an Egyptian ambassador for 4 or 5 years. And then I remember times when Egypt called us to help them in the Sinai when ISIS was active. Right. Yeah, and we did help them. So there is good times, bad times, but there is a profound common interest in this relationship between Egypt and Israel. And it's true, we are having now some difficulties, obviously, because we would like to see some of the Palestinians moving out from Gaza into Egypt. They won't hear anything about that. There are some ideas like the ships, but I am confident that this relationship will hold, and at the end, Egypt and Israel...
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think Egypt wants Hamas to be completely destroyed?
I'm not sure about that. I know that they see Hamas, and rightly so, as an offspring of the Muslim Brotherhood, which are their enemy in Egypt. But I am not sure that Egypt wants to see the Hamas completely destroyed, because they don't know what's coming instead of Hamas, after Hamas. By the way, we also don't know. We speak about destroying Hamas, it's okay. I am for it. What comes afterwards? Maybe if Egypt would know what comes afterwards, let's take, for example, that the Palestinian Authority would come back to Gaza. It's difficult, I know, but let's say that there is such an option. I am sure the Egyptians would love that. But how do you do that? This is very hard. So I think that Egypt is now interested in trying to calm the situation down. When I say calming the situation, it's a big word, but to try to limit, limit fighting, so that fighting does not go all over the Middle East, including them.
And release the pressure on them to open the Rafah crossing. I just want to point out that the Egyptian Prime Minister actually spoke today very strongly against allowing any Palestinian refugees into Sinai. He said, Mustafa Madbouli, he said Egypt remains committed to protecting its land and sovereignty, regardless of the cost.
So they're talking as if allowing, Gazan civilians is some kind of threat to their security. And I think that there's a reason why they're using that language, because Gaza is infested with Islamist jihadists who are mingled in with the civilians. And the last thing Egypt wants is to have these people come in and link up with the jihadists in Sinai, who have already been busy with an insurrection there for over a decade. And it views this as a direct national security threat. So I think that Egypt's policy has been to separate Sinai and Gaza, and it's now very worried that this policy is going to collapse.
That's exactly where I want to go. It's even deeper than what you're saying, and you're just getting at it, Yaakov, which is that Egypt has enjoyed over the course of really the last 60 years almost, is the fact that it didn't have responsibility over the Gaza Strip. Right? After the 1967 war, Israel occupies Gaza. Even after 2005, when Israel disengages with Gaza, the border crossings between Gaza and Israel are in many ways the main entry points into Gaza, right? For humanitarian aid and so forth in normal times. Kerem Shalom, Erez, etc. Right? Even more recently, a simple example, the visa deal with the United States, the visa waiver deal, right? What was one of the provisions? That American citizens in Gaza could cross the Erez border crossing and fly out of Ben Gurion Airport, right? Not go through Egypt. Now, of course, the tables have turned. No matter what the result of the war will be, Egypt will become responsible for Gaza. I think that die has simply been cast, but they're doing their best to set the terms of that responsibility, and of course to avoid worst-case scenarios that Yaakov was talking about. The more narrow question is, can they avoid taking in injured Palestinians? That's what Israel's trying to push.
Well, women and children and elderly people. Can I just point out some bad news? Just in 2 IDF soldiers killed in the battles inside Gaza. They haven't been identified, but we are hearing that 2 IDF soldiers have been killed as the fighting continues. Avi, you were talking about bringing back Fatah to Gaza eventually.
I didn't say Fatah,
I'm sorry, the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority. I just wanted to ask if you'd seen comments made by Mohammed Dahlan, the former Fatah commander, in recent days, and he's ruled out the idea of coming back to rule Gaza, but he did make some interesting comments about an elected body that would rule over the Palestinian territories and Gaza. What do you think?
First of all, you have to understand where Dahlan stands. He's a rival of Abu Mazen. So, of course, if he doesn't have a stake in it, he's not interested. But maybe Dahlan may see a future in that.
This is someone, by the way, so viewers understand, who has a history of working with Israel, right? Of course, before the Hamas takeover in Gaza.
He lives in the UAE and he has done since 2007.
Right, but before that, based in Gaza, and was someone who had been seen for most of his career as working very closely with the Israeli government.
Absolutely. I personally think that would be the best solution, to have the Palestinian Authority take control of Gaza,
he also said
like we wanted it to be from the beginning. Well, if we go back to 2006, this is what we wanted.
He says that it won't be possible for Israel to destroy Hamas. I don't know if you saw those comments, Yaakov.
I didn't. And look, I think, all of these guys in Fatah, the PA, and even Fatah opposition people like Dahlan, they're playing a very delicate balancing act, because they don't ever want to be seen as the people willing to ride on Israeli tanks into Gaza. That would obviously destroy their legitimacy on the Palestinian street. But I think quietly, there's so much doublespeak going on. Let's not forget, the Palestinian Authority in Fatah was, overthrown in a violent coup.
Overthrown, literally, people thrown off of buildings.
Overthrown from the 6th floor of the building, yeah.
And they will never forgave Hamas for that. Yeah. And I think that, quietly and away from the statements, there are some elements in Fatah and the PA that would be very happy to see Hamas destroyed by Israel, and they would see it as an opportunity to come back into Gaza. I would just add that from a security perspective, none of this could happen without enabling full freedom of movement for the IDF. I'm not talking about large raids or anything like that, but targeted security raids, as occurs in the West Bank. That would have to continue in Gaza long after this war, if there's any chance for that.
So Israel would reimpose security control of Gaza, if not.
Freedom of movement, I would call it freedom of movement, acting on intelligence, not letting Hamas rebuild capabilities ever again to the extent that it has.
Like it happened in 2002 with Judea and Samaria.
Right.
We entered there. It was quite a long war, but at the end of this war, we kept freedom of action. Until now, look what happened tonight in Jenin, for example.
Exactly.
If we can have the same in Gaza, we could live with that, I think.